Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Stacey Dinner-Levin about her role in the upcoming Minnesota Mammalehs Stories from the Tribe event on June 24th. We talk about what it's like to perform in a storytelling event, how the theater is central to her family, and that one time she wrote a play on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Stacey, the Minnesota Mammalehs Stories from the Tribe is at Bethel Synagogue and features 12 women on the bima telling their true Jewish stories that have a thread to being or having a mammaleh. The good, the bad, the funny, the sad, the hilarious, and the golden moments. Tickets are now on sale and going fast. You can buy them at bit.ly/mammalehs. That's bit.ly/mammalehs. Stacey Dinner-Levin, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to get to talk to you because you are one of the 12 women who are participating in TC Jewfolk's first ever live storytelling show, Minnesota Mammalehs Stories from the Tribe. Why are you so excited to take part in this show?
Good question. I have participated in other storytelling venues with Listen to Your Mother, and I have found it to be a wonderful experience and a really rewarding experience. This show, I think, is extra special because it is all Jewish women, so it is focused on our stories. I was, as you were saying, one of 12 women, and I was thinking 12 tribes. It never occurred to me, but we kind of represent that way, I guess. And I just think it is really important to tell our stories as Jewish women, especially right now, but really anytime. And
so the connective thread between our show and Listen to Your Mother is, of course, Galit Breen, your friend, my friend and co-worker here at Jewfolk,
right,
where she is the one of the Twin Cities producers of Listen to Your Mother and has been doing it for now 11 or 12 years.
I think it should be 11 years, if I have it right.
Okay, and what was it about that as a venue for storytelling that first got you interested in sort of continuing in that theme?
In that theme, I had done some writing. I had written a play that had to deal with raising my son who is autistic.
Okay.
And I had that out there years ago. I had not been telling my own story. I'd write my story and then have an actor perform my story. But I had never delved into that. But I had heard about Listen to Your Mother as a lot of women who do the show do through a friend who did listen to their mother. And I was kind of like, wow, this is kind of where I live and breathe, isn't it? It's motherhood, it's writing, it's storytelling, which has always been something that I felt was a little bit of my superpower.
Yeah.
And so I thought, how come I didn't know about this? And I auditioned for it, and it was just really everything I hoped it would be.
How many times have you participated in it? Because I know it's been quite a few.
Well, I've done 4 shows.
Okay.
So, yes, and I just, the thing is with me is that I did write this play, and a lot of people were saying, when are you going to write another play? I'll just snap that out. But it was more about, I kept feeling I had this nagging thing that I had a ton of small bite stories, little stories, not full-length plays, but, kind of random stories that I thought were pretty significant. And so I didn't know where to put those, and this gave me the place to do that. And so, yeah, I've done 4 because, like I said, I got probably a trunk full of little small bite stories.
And that's perfect. It's in similar format as Listen to Your Mother, of a 5-minute story.
Right.
That you write it yourself. The editing process. What's that like as you sort of go through the process, not just on your own, but as you read the story with the other performers to get feedback.
Right. yes, you do some editing yourself. I have my husband read everything I write. He gives some of his input and what he thinks is working, not. And then, of course, Vicky and Galit from Listen to Your Mother would read the piece and come back with some suggestions. And then you do read it at a rehearsal. And it's kind of timed. It is timed because you have that time limit. And then you go back and you do some more cleaning. It's a process. I mean, what they say is true. Writing is rewriting, and that really is what it is.
Oh, absolutely. No question.
Yeah. And you have to be able to be open to that. These stories are very personal.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you want to hold on to certain things, but you have to say, what is the greater purpose of this story?
For sure. It seems to me that there has to be a certain amount of vulnerability that comes with this, a willingness to be really open about something that is potentially like super personal.
Yeah.
What's it like to just sort of cut loose and do that?
Yeah.
Because that's, I got to think, hard for it might even be hard for you too to do.
Yeah. I mean, you are certainly making yourself vulnerable, and it can be very, very emotional. It can be unexpectedly emotional. You can find yourself getting emotional in a place you didn't think you would be getting emotional. And the wonderful thing about my experience with Listen to Your Mother is that, and Galit will tell you this over and over, and it's the absolute truth. It is the most supportive, loving audience you could ever hope to be in front of. Yeah. Just really the energy in there, and the other women in the group too. It's just such a safe space. So there's those moments where you really feel and you go deep and you take your time. And you get yourself composed and you get through it. And it can be scary to write it.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about having someone like Galit in your corner, because they'll work through those emotions with you too, or those anxieties.
So you'll go over your story with your husband, but all of the storytelling events you've done, whether it's the upcoming one on the 24th or the Listen to Your Mother episodes you've done, is that they're about being a mother.
Yeah.
Do you talk to your children about it at all?
Yeah. I mean, my children have been the subject of these stories.
Sure.
Sometimes in ways that might not be the most flattering. You call it mom's payback. But, and I talk to them and let them know that, this is what I'm going to write about, and this is and they've been, wonderfully supportive about it. Yeah.
What's the difference between, you mentioned you wrote that play and it was autobiographical.
You're right.
About your son, but that was a performance for somebody else.
Right.
I mean, it's your story in your words, but it was for someone else to do. This isn't so much a performance as it is a reading, but you still have to have a presence.
Right.
When you're on stage, or in this case at Bethel Synagogue on the Bima.
Right.
What's the difference when you're writing for you versus writing your story for someone else?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when you're writing something like a story like this, it almost feels a little bit more like an essay, a little bit. There may be some dialogue that you would include if there's a conversation that you're including into that story. But with a play, there are monologues. But
Sure.
they're usually, there's other characters involved and there's a back and forth that's going on. Here it is more like, the old days of sitting around a campfire and telling a good story, that kind of basic thing.
That's an excellent way to look at it, because that really is what it is. And
Right.
I think when you have friends and families, or you're, in the crowd, and you have this supportive group, not just in the crowd, but the other women that you were, the producers of the show, and the other women who are telling their stories.
Right.
There is a camaraderie that comes out of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of a magical thing that happens when you find yourself in a room in a basement of a library or something with a group of complete strangers, and you sit around a table and they start to read their stories, and before you know it, you're passing the tissues and you're laughing and you're connecting and you're like, yeah, me too, or wow, and there's something really incredible that happens in that space.
Do you ever hear somebody else tell their story like right before yours and be like, oh boy, like is there a competitive streak where it's like, oh, this needs to be better, like I got to do something?
I think we're really, really good at supporting each other on this. I mean, sometimes you worry. I guess sometimes something's really funny, somebody might say, "Oh, I don't want to follow you," Usually, and the stories are so individual, even if they have sort of similar themes, which happens sometimes. They're still a one of a kind story because it's coming from a one of a kind person, and it's great. If there's any competitiveness there, you don't really feel it. There's really so much warmth and connection.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I know maybe it's because I'm a male. I think it's the competitive streak that comes out. I don't know.
Well, in the end, we're putting on a show and we want it to be good.
Yeah.
And so you're cheering for everyone. You want this thing to, to really have the energy and the feeling behind it. I think if there's something competitive, is that in a good way, is that if you get up and you set the tone for the piece, and then somebody might be really, really nervous, but the person before them really rocked it, and it was like, okay, I got to carry that torch. I got to keep that going. So we inspire each other to be better, I think.
How much does the crowd lift you when you're doing these kinds of things?
Oh, so much. And we were just talking about it. We had a rehearsal just before I came here. For those who hadn't done anything like this, about that there'll be like laughs where you don't expect it, and knowing to hold for those laughs and whatever. But that does happen, and they really, really. They really boost you, and if it's an emotional moment and you need to stop to compose yourself, the audience holds you too, and it's really a beautiful thing.
It's great that you've done these before, because I'm sure there are some people who are part of the Stories from the Tribecast who haven't done Listen to Your Mother before. Mm-hmm. How much, I know yourself, Robin Awend, are just two of the people who have done a Listen to Your Mother show. Mm-hmm. How much do you think it helps the sort of the rookies in the cast who have never done anything like this?
I don't want to speak for anybody else.
Sure.
I think they have questions about how this goes, how this flows. Logistical questions about when you come up, when you come down, and so we can certainly help them with that. A lot of them, I was just going to say a lot because it's not a lot, but many have seen a Listen to Your Mother show if they haven't been in it. Mm-hmm. Not everyone though, but they're just kind of, it's like a first time, It's not Listen to Your Mother, but it's kind of like it is a first time listen when you're a first time cast member and you're just kind of figuring it all out. But
that was you at one point.
Yeah, it comes together. It really does.
And I've been part of a Galit Breen production before.
Oh wow.
For Jew folk, and she runs a very organized ship.
She does.
So I think any of the cast members who might have a little bit of nerves,
yep,
you'll be okay.
You're in safe, capable hands.
Very.
Right.
So you mentioned the play that you wrote. I want to talk a little bit more about that. And you sort of the question you had asked that people asked you of, oh, when are you going to write, when are you just going to, crank out another one?
Right.
What was there something happening at the time that you wrote that show that inspired you to put that out to the world at that time?
It's interesting you say that. I guess there was. My mother had recently passed away, and she used to always say to me, my son, my eldest son, Jordy, is autistic. And she would say to me, someday you'll write about him. And my husband is the theater person, an actor and writer, and I kept kind of bugging him about it. You need to write this, because there were things that living with Jordy was in so many ways so theatrical. People say, why don't you write a book? Because there's always the book of the week of a mother raising an autistic child.
Sure.
And I kept being in this kind of theater world. I was like, this is really lends itself to theater. And some of it was outrageous and unbelievable and funny and tragic. I mean, it was all the elements. And he kept saying he was too close to it and I can't do it. And a friend was kind of bugging me, saying, you do it. I don't know anything about writing a play. What am I going to write a play? And it was one of those stories where, you're laying in bed in sort of that drifty sleep kind of, and one of the scenes just came to me. I mean, I just sat up in bed and was like, wow. And I said, okay, I'm gonna try to write this, and I'm gonna write till I get to that scene. And that scene ended up being the exact midway point of the play. That's where the intermission came in. So then it was like, okay, we're there, Act 1, let's keep going. So, it was something that kind of took over me.
And I guess, does it get performed often?
It hasn't been performed recently. It was performed across the country in different places. It was covered in American Theater magazine, and then the live play was put on DVD.
Oh.
So it was sort of like a like one of those PBS kind of, playhouse kind of things. And that sold.
That's great.
And then we actually ended up making an additional DVD because something really bizarre happened that I didn't expect to happen, which was that my son ended up playing himself in a production of it, which was never the intention. But
wow.
And at that point we thought we got to capture that. Yeah, and I didn't mention that my husband played our son in the original production.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had said to me, so I suppose I'm playing myself. And I said, no. I said, the dad doesn't have that big of a part. Just kidding.
Well, listen, since he said he was too close to the show to write it, you ended up doing it. I think that's probably fair that he had a smaller part.
Yeah, and he really didn't. I was teasing him. But I just felt that nobody would be able to understand Jordy the way he understood Jordy.
I think that's
and
probably
mannerisms
fair.
And things like that.
Yeah.
And so the play is written in a way that it was only, in my mind, could be done by an adult male.
Mm-hmm.
And so he plays Jordy from 3 to 13 with one imagined scene at 18.
Okay.
And within 30 seconds or less, the audience is completely convinced that they're looking at a small child.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the magic of theater.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So how did Jordy feel about having his father play him? Because I think he might understand it a little better than many people might, because you are a dramatic theater family. Your other son Ryan is also an actor. Your husband is in the theater. Jordy is also in the theater. Did he feel like he was being imitated or mocked in some way, or honored?
He didn't, and Jordy has a limited understanding of, which is why it made it so amazing that he actually stepped into it. He recognized right away that his father was playing him. He thought it was hilarious. He would take the script into the bathroom with him and read it and laugh. He thought he was just fantastic. When he ended up playing the part himself, he was a bit competitive with his dad, you know. So if he was acting up in rehearsal, I would say, you know what, I can get Dad to come in and just do this. No, Dad's not going to do it. Me. So it's very interesting.
Whatever keeps him in check.
Exactly.
Is it, Was it hard in that in the performance that he did of like being the, it's one thing when you're writing a role that your husband plays.
Right.
Like it's the conversations you and he can have about the role can be different because your husband's level of understanding of not just the character but theater in general is going to be
Right.
very different than what Jordy
Right.
has. How was that working with him in that level?
With Jordy or my
With
husband?
Jordy, with
With
Jordy.
Jordy. Well, how it came about was never expected. I mean, we really at one argued, my husband and I, about even letting him see the play because we thought, that it might inspire some old behaviors to come back. So a youth director who knew Jordy well and did plays with him at the JCC in St. Paul, and he came to me and he said, I would like to do a youth production of this show. I would like Jordy to play himself. And for 2 years, I dodged that,
Okay.
up, down, and sideways. I was like, that's just crazy to me. And I was worried about having Jordy revisit behaviors that had gone away and what that might happen if we did that. And then it was produced in Texas, and the young actor playing Jordy in Texas was autistic. And his parents were very, very proud. And he was very proud. And I thought, okay, nothing about us without us, right?
Sure.
He should have a right to tell his story. And I saw how empowering it was for this young man. So I said, let's do it. And it was, I wish I would have made a documentary of the rehearsal process, because that was something.
Yeah.
And he did do those behaviors, and then he would stop on cue, which was an astonishing thing to watch. And the couple of times he said to me, he looked at the script and said, I didn't say it that way. I didn't do it that way. And I was like, okay, Jordy, you show me. And so it was really kind of a phenomenal experience. And when I tell you that, I should say, Jordy would not be described as a type 1 autism. He is what people used to call Asperger's.
Oh, sure. Okay.
He is quite involved with his autism.
Okay.
And will not live independently. So for him to do something like this and the way that he did it, was really it was beyond words to describe what that experience was.
That's amazing, and I'm sure there are stories from the rehearsal processes that would make excellent. I don't want to call them a sketch. It's not really a sketch, but excellent stories.
Yes, they'd be great for. I can pull them for Listen to Your Mother for Mammalehs.
We got future years of great stories.
Yes, there's plenty in there. I will say, there's one scene at the end where the mother imagines him typical as a typical teenager, and the director said, "What are we going to do about that scene?" And I said, "Well, just do it." The boy in Texas did not sound typical, and we just did it. And Jordy actually came to me and he said, I don't know this scene. He actually said that to me, and I said, you'll memorize it, you'll just do it. And what ended up happening was he sounds completely and utterly typical in that scene, so much so that our rabbi who came to see it asked me afterwards if he had progressed that much, and I said no. And he goes, how do you explain that scene? And I said, I can't, but I have it on
DVD.
Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, I think some of the scene is the acting gene is there, but there's only so much
right
theatrical work that can cover
I gotta
a certain
tell you,
thing.
Rehearsal was, for me and the director, the first time he did it. You had to lift our jaws off the floor.
Yeah.
It was what just happened. And I was like, I don't know.
That last scene, imagining your son is being neurotypical, that must have been really hard for you to write.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in that play that is pretty brutal. But yeah,
I think it sort of speaks to the level of vulnerability you're willing to have with yourself and an audience see of you to be able to put that out there.
Right. And it was hugely courageous on my husband's part.
Yeah.
And he told me not to protect him. There was a scene that needed to be in the play that I had left out. And he said, don't protect me. And I put it in, and it was like almost a weaving where the two threads, it just all of a sudden needed to be there, and it all came together. And he thought, that the audience would perceive him to be, a very unlikable individual. And what really happened was that the fathers came forward in a way that I never expected.
Really?
Yeah, and it became almost more important to the men in the audience, even though I'd written from the mother's point of view.
Right.
And that was very healing for my husband, because they came forward and said, this is me. This is me.
I certainly don't have the experience that you and your husband have, but I would think it could go one of a couple ways. It could either be really healing to sort of put that out there and put yourself out there in that way, or it can be really, really hard.
Yeah.
Like a gut punch to
I
sort
think
of...
it was a combination of both, but in the end, the response from the dads of all ages, was just not what I expected at all. And I expected that maybe from the women, because I was telling it from a woman's point of view, but it spoke to fathers in a way I didn't anticipate. And in that, it helped him.
That's great. I mean, it's nice that he didn't want to be protected, and also I think it's good that there wasn't a level of input such that it changed the perspective of where the show comes from.
Right.
Because obviously he's there. It's his life too. He is in the story and a big part of it, of course. But it's written from a perspective that is going to be very unique to what he brings to it.
Yes.
So have you thought about another show?
Maybe.
Another type of show?
Maybe kind of sometimes, throw some stuff around, but I haven't dug in as of yet. And I've really loved the whole storytelling process. And even when I was, in the middle and touring with Autistic License, people would describe me as a playwright, and I would say I feel so much more comfortable with storyteller.
Sure.
It just
it all comes back to what brought us together in the first place.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, playwriting is storytelling.
Sure.
Yeah, songwriting is storytelling. Yeah.
If it's done well, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Even of course, visual art is storytelling. Yeah. So there's just many forms of doing it.
Yep. Lots of different mediums. Is your background in writing?
No, I dodged it. I had teachers in school that tried to encourage me and wanted me to take AP English and all that, and I didn't. I was not confident. But I was always on my own writing little pieces, which is why my mother said to me, someday you'll write about him, because I had things that made it out into the world, but it was never my intention to be a writer.
Okay. So what is your background then, if not for writing?
My background was I had a BA in Women's Studies, a BA in Social Work, and a Master's in Human Development.
Okay.
Yeah.
So teaching?
I do work as a paraprofessional with kids with special needs. At the time, with my women's studies background and my master's, I always thought I would go into some kind of, advocacy for women.
Yeah.
And actually, when I was finishing up my graduate work is when Jordy was diagnosed.
Oh.
And it was really weird because it was... everything was the same groundwork. It was just a different population.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I went to St. Mary's Graduate School, and the dean of that program at the time was a Jewish woman of this.
At St. Mary's?
Yes.
Who knew?
I had no idea I was at a Catholic institution. She was like my advisor, and and she said to me, "You're going to do stuff advocacy for disability. And
Yeah.
I was like, no. Yes, I'm dealing with this with my kid, but I'm going to, and that's what for many years, that's what I was doing. I was doing a lot of sort of social work related positions. I went to work for Pacer Center.
Oh, sure.
And
Great organization.
Yes. And I ran their puppet program, and I wrote a script for one of the puppets on autism.
Oh.
And so that was my first kind of stepping into that. It was just,
It's fascinating.
yeah. This how your life takes these paths.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and that's what the executive director said, I want you to write a script, and I was like, I can't write a script, and then put this thing out, and
Writing what you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and obviously, I don't know what year that was, or when the play was written, but it's like the evolution of, I'm sure what you know firsthand about autism sort of helped. What you knew at that time is what that script looked like for Pacer Center, and then what you knew and how that evolved is what the play looked like.
Right. And of course, when she said, I need you to write the script, my inner voice was saying, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I can't do it, and I did it. And then, when I was thinking about this play, and I was saying, I can't do this, you need to do this, I can't do. And so it was that little inner voice that I think a lot of women have, where they keep diminishing and diminishing.
Yeah.
And I'm at a point in my life where I'm learning not to do that so much anymore.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Because self-doubt is a very real thing, and I think particularly so amongst women. They have a tendency to pass things off to somebody else.
Right.
The imposter syndrome.
Right.
Of it is, I think, a very real fear.
Yes, absolutely. And I spent years with my husband. We would hang out a lot at the Playwright Center.
Sure.
On Tuesday nights, sometimes we go, a friend had written something, our friend was in something, or my husband was doing a reading for something, or we would just go because we would see friends on a Tuesday night. And boy, oh boy, did I see some crap.
That was not where I thought that was going.
It was astonishing. And some of this crap had gotten like McKnight fellowships. Oh, yeah. And I said, I'm not going to go into details because you don't know who's out there listening.
That's absolutely right.
But it was just crap. And I sat there and went, you've got to be kidding me. So, when I put my hands to the keyboard, I was like, it couldn't be worse than that play. It could not be worse than that play.
Wow, that was not what I was expecting.
Oh, let me tell you, there's, certainly, obviously, there's great talent out there. And August Wilson had his plays read at the Playwright Center, so that there were great things out there.
Of course.
But it is just filled with, a lot of mental masturbation. I don't know if we can say that.
We can say that. Look, the market gets very saturated.
Yes, yeah.
Like people, it's good that people try. You never know what kind of great art will come out of.
But everybody
absolute
thinks...
shit for a first attempt.
Yeah.
But you got to put it out there.
Second, third attempts.
That too.
So they're giving McKnight fellowships to some of this shit.
Yes.
So a couple of things for me. One, I was actually learning about the craft.
Yes.
Without knowing that.
Sure.
And two, I was learning that you can do this, because if this is out here and people are giving people fellowships for it.
Yeah.
You can do this. So,
and I think that the show represented a voice and a story and an experience that needed to be told, and could only be told by somebody who lived that level of angst and anxiety and pain and hardship.
And that's what I told myself. I said, listen, people might not like the way I write, but they can't tell me my story isn't my story.
Right.
This is my story. There was in my undergraduate years, there was a lot of things that I was taking in my liberal arts education that also prepared me for all of this without me knowing it till years later. But I had a professor who, women's studies professor, who used to quote Jewish poet, Muriel Rukeyser.
Okay.
And she quoted her over and over and over again to us. And the quote is, "What would happen if one woman told the truth of her life? The world would split open." So I'd heard that quote and never thought I would be telling any truths, right? But I sat at the keyboard and I was like, let's see if we can make a crack.
And you've done it over and over and over since.
Yep.
And
She told us over. So there was a lot of that prepared me.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know.
Amazing. Well, we are very excited to hear what your story is going to be on June 24th at Bethel. We will have links in the show notes for where you can get the tickets. But before we let you go, last couple of questions.
Okay.
First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
What is my favorite Jewish holiday? I'll have to say Passover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular reason?
Lots of reasons. I host at my house. Most of the people that are there are friends that are not Jewish. It's a mixed group, and they never miss it. And it is a time where the foods, where I use my mother's and my grandmother's recipes, and I do it the way I cook my matzo ball soup in an old-fashioned pressure cooker. And there's the whole ritual piece of, doing something that was generational like that, and they taught me how to do it. And when the steam fills up the kitchen, then it's like they come back. So and then to be able to feed people and have people be happy with, it's such a loving kind of thing.
Absolutely. And what is, speaking of foods, your favorite Jewish food?
My favorite Jewish food. Okay, well, probably I would have to say the matzo ball soup, but there's many, it's hard to choose.
I know. Picking one is the hardest part of these last couple questions.
You're
not alone in struggling with an answer, but no.
Yes, I mean, I could make a list, but yeah.
Most people try to.
You're right.
Well, Stacey Dinner-Levin, thank you so much for joining me. This was a blast. I really appreciated it. And best of luck with all of the fine-tuning and, of course, being on the beam on June 24th.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.